All right, here we go. Round 2.
Okay.
All right, I'm just going to be straight with you all. We recorded like half the episode, but we realized our audio wasn't picking up. So here we go.
Here we go.
This is going to be the best episode
Showtime.
yet. I've never had a like full practice round
Oh my gosh.
of the first half.
Yeah.
I want to start the same way though.
Okay.
I'm curious, as a professionally trained mental health, like clinical psychologist, what was your experience like after helping so many women specifically navigate postpartum and their mental health during postpartum to then experience your own postpartum mental health struggles, having helped people for so long beforehand? Like, what did that look like for you going through it?
Yeah. I mean, it was shocking.
Yeah.
I was surprised, to say the least. But as an expert, I kind of was experiencing it in real time, so I knew what was happening. It was sort of surreal. And so I was just self-diagnosing in my closet, right? And luckily, I had set myself up with the right postpartum mental health care, treatment that I advise all my patients to do, regardless of if you think you need it or not. So I was able to go from rock bottom to thriving very quickly.
I want to get into that toolkit.
Yeah.
But I also am curious, do you find that, not that you would wish this upon yourself or anyone, but do you find that going through your own postpartum struggles with your mental health then helped you professionally with your clients?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have to have the same experiences as our patients to understand and to empathize. And certainly even if we have, even when I have patients that have postpartum, everyone experiences it differently. So
Right.
It's all unique anyway, but it did give me more insight into exactly what it feels like to have your brain on fire, to not sleep for 5 days, to go through, the symptoms of postpartum depression and postpartum OCD in real time, to experience things like psychomotor slowing, which is when your body moves very slowly, but your brain, can still move very fast, which I see rarely in my clinical practice, but it happens. And so I'm so glad that I had that experience. And I think it just helps me connect with my patients in a way that's I understand, I've been there, and I went from rock bottom to thriving, quickly. And so I feel, equipped to help them get to the other side of this, no matter how bad it gets.
Right. I want to get into how you got from rock bottom to thriving. But first, can we talk about the different aspects of quote unquote postpartum? Because I think we use that term to just lump sum a lot of diagnoses, I guess. So can you walk us through the difference between postpartum anxiety, postpartum OCD, and postpartum depression?
Yes. And then we should also talk about high functioning anxiety and depression and OCD, because I think a lot of mothers, postpartum anxiety is just excessive worry, right? And it feels like a preoccupation that you can't control it, and it's very scary. It causes distress. And then when we think of clinical levels of postpartum anxiety, it impairs functioning. So the natural behavioral response to anxiety is to avoid. So now you're avoiding things that make you anxious. You're avoiding triggers. You're avoiding, leaving your house at times, right? Because things are scary out there. And so that's postpartum anxiety. Postpartum depression is trouble sleeping, loss of interest, feeling guilty about things, loss of energy, poor concentration, changes in appetite, the psychomotor slowing I mentioned, and sometimes suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts, and it can be treated. 100% of postpartum mental health disorders are treatable, and so we want to encourage people to get help if they're struggling, even if they're still functioning fine, because again of the high functioning part of this. And then postpartum OCD is the excessive worries, the intrusive thoughts, and the rituals, the avoidance, the compulsions that come along with it to sort of neutralize it. Or it can be sometimes pure obsessional, which is just intense preoccupation. That's the kind that I had. And it's really distressing. It's really hard to have any of those.
When you mention intrusive thoughts, it's something I've talked about a lot because I experienced them pretty intensely with my first. I thought that fell more into anxiety originally, but now when I think about the thoughts that I would have, like I would see these kind of visions almost. I equate them to Final Destination, the movie, because I would see a vision of me, and I hate saying this because I had no interest in doing it, but I would see myself, if I were walking down the stairs, throwing my baby over the railing or something like that. And then when I realized, okay, that was a thought, I had a hard time disassociating from that thought, where then I was thinking it's going to happen because I saw it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds like postpartum OCD.
How do you recommend we work through intrusive thoughts? Because I know from my community and discussions we've had, many of the listeners also have experienced them or are experiencing them.
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say that 90% of new parents experience intrusive thoughts. So it can be part of the normative experience. It doesn't mean you have postpartum OCD if you just have intrusive thoughts. And so for just to cope with intrusive thoughts in general, I would say take some deep breaths, recognize that, ground yourself in the moment, maybe name like 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste, to sort of ground yourself in the present and get away from your thoughts. You can also get some psychological distance from the intrusive thought by saying, I'm having a thought just like any other thought. So you're having this intrusive thought that you might throw your baby. But it's just like any other thought, like I have to go to the store today or I want ice cream. It's still a thought. And so to sort of categorize it as it's just a thought, I have a million thoughts per day. When we're new parents, we get anxious when we have these thoughts, but we need to tolerate that this comes with the overwhelming adjustment to being the primary, responsible party for your baby. And so it takes time to adjust. Now, if you have postpartum OCD, so the difference between, getting an intrusive thought and not having OCD and someone that has more postpartum OCD would be that the person would think that they have those thoughts and that it means something, right? Yeah. That it means they're going to do it. And then they would go to lengths to avoid going down the stairs or to even avoid holding their baby because they feel like they're unsafe. And so that kind of creeps into the postpartum OCD category that, and what's interesting about postpartum OCD is that that's actually curable. Whereas if you have OCD, prior to having a baby or just at any time, it's not curable. But if you have it with solely postpartum onset, it's curable.
I didn't know that.
So that's reassuring. And also we know that postpartum OCD is much more common with mothers. 9% of mothers are vulnerable and have postpartum OCD, whereas 2% of the general population has OCD.
Interesting. I think one thing that I did that with the help of my therapist that really helped me is take the example of the stairs, saying it out loud and being like, okay, my brain is preparing me for worst case scenario. That doesn't mean I'm actually going to do it. It's just alerting me, hey, you're going down the stairs. This railing is maybe a little low. You're not just running down the stairs by yourself anymore. You now have this like 8-pound baby in your arms. Something about that helped me fight the like desire to create certain rituals to feel like I would then avoid that reality, if that makes sense.
Right. And you can also, thank that intrusive thought for coming because it's alerting you to potential danger, which your brain is biologically trying to do to protect your baby.
Right.
So it's being pulled to do that anyway. So that's what it's alerting you to do. But I would say that if you have postpartum OCD, we do have evidence-based treatments that are available. Things like exposure and response prevention, which would be if you really have like postpartum OCD. Yeah.
And what about postpartum blues? Because that term is thrown around a lot. And I always kind of thought it was the prior generation's way of just not saying they were depressed. But what's the difference between postpartum blues and postpartum depression?
Yeah, so baby blues last days.
That's what I meant, baby blues.
yeah. Well, either way. So baby blues last days, not weeks. If you are having these mood changes and they last 2 weeks or longer, you're in like the clinical threshold of like postpartum depression or anxiety. And so, again, baby blues will end in a couple days. It usually happens, a couple days after the baby is born. And it's like clockwork. You're not going to get baby blues 3 months into having a baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Is there a cap, and maybe there's not, but is there a cap on when you could get postpartum depression until?
So it's such a good question, and I explore this in my book. Also, I interviewed a lot of experts like in the field as well, because I wanted to talk about this,
Right.
because we have sort of a 1 year mark, right? And the research goes to 2 years, right? But really we just don't have the longitudinal research following women, further out. But I would say that, around 1 to 2 years, but the cutoff is like not, it's arbitrary, right? Because then you might be having another kid at the same time.
Right.
And so, you can get depression and anxiety when you're pregnant as well. You can get perinatal mental health issues when you're pregnant. So there's a lot of overlap. So I don't want anyone to sort of think that, oh, this is a hard and fast, cutoff, 1 year, 2 years,
Right.
when it's really arbitrary, in the clinical world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it was something I always wondered, because I felt I had, with my first postpartum anxiety and maybe OCD from the get-go, like right away. But then I didn't experience the postpartum depression that I was diagnosed with more until month like 4-ish, 4 or 5. And one more thing around OCD, does that also include, or is this more anxiety, the obsession of schedule or feeding or sleeping? Because that was something I experienced where I was, the tracking. We see people who are cataloging every pee, every poop, every sleep, every feed, which boob, all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of those people with my first, not my second. Mm-hmm. And I think part of it is you just want control because you're so freaking overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Does that fall under more anxiety behavior or OCD behavior?
So, at the surface level, it's more anxious behavior,
Okay.
right? You're wanting to control something that feels out of control. And so the tracking can give you peace of mind. But it doesn't mean that if you have postpartum OCD, you won't be doing that also.
Right.
So, but just because you do that doesn't mean you have postpartum OCD. We would really, have to dig a little deeper to understand like what's behind that. And are you, afraid of something bad happening if the baby doesn't poop 5 times a day, or if they're not getting that extra ounce of breast milk, right? So it's it's a little, it could be both, could be any,
Right.
Yeah. Oh, but I will say,
Yeah.
I think people should know this, is that we tend to see 2 spikes in postpartum.
Okay.
One is after the baby is born, if a mother doesn't breastfeed, because there can be dramatic shifts in hormone changes. Right. And otherwise we see another peak around when you start to wean from breastfeeding. And so it's important to also think about, if you're gonna, which I recommend, have some mental health support, to schedule the follow-ups around those times as well.
Okay. Which is also kind of hard, because
you
never know when that's exactly going to happen. If you're going to breastfeed, if the milk supply comes in, all of the things.
I know.
But I understand that.
Yeah.
On that topic as well, what about the feeling of not feeling connected to your baby? Mm-hmm. Because I know that's something that a lot of women experience. And I think I had these thoughts where before having a baby, always thought, oh, if you don't feel connected to your baby, then you have postpartum depression. And that's what postpartum depression looks like, and it doesn't look like anything else, which is false. Mm-hmm. But what does that experience, does it tie into any of these diagnoses? Is it part of baby blues? Does it depend?
Well, I have a whole chapter on baby bonding. Okay. So I hear that it's more the norm that it takes mothers, longer to bond with their baby. But I think in the media and in our culture and in movies, we're supposed to fall in love overnight with our babies. And it's like, unrealistic.
They're a stranger.
Right? Yeah. You're building a relationship, right? And basically, I say this in the book, I say this with my patients, like, have you ever felt particularly bonded to an object that poops and sleeps and cries and, does nothing else? Mm-hmm. I mean, is that easy to bond with? Probably not. But I think that mothers feel like something's wrong with them if they're not in love with their baby overnight. And so, I had that experience where I was like, I know I love my baby, but do I feel I love my baby? Like, and I'm like going through the questions, and that's more the typical experience. It takes months. And so I just want to normalize that. Yeah.
I also think, coming from a different perspective, what I experienced, and I think many people may have also, is that I felt the deep connection right away with my first. Mm-hmm. And then going into my second, I expected the same thing. But because I had a 2.5-year-old at that time, I felt so deeply connected to my 2.5-year-old because we've had 2.5 years to get to know each other and love each other. And he's a human who talks and converses and interacts with me. And that's a very different relationship than suddenly being back with a newborn.
Yeah.
And I beat myself up over that because I remember saying to my husband, I feel like such an awful mom that I'd rather right now spend time with our toddler than our newborn.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of bored.
Yeah.
And I miss our toddler and I miss having these conversations. And I feel so connected to him because that relationship has grown so much over these years. And what my therapist reminded me of, which you talk about in the book, is like it takes time to build that relationship. And it doesn't mean that that's a forever thing. I can tell you it's not, because I feel equally bonded and close to both of them. And I love them so fucking much. Right. But that was hard for me to work through the second time. And there was a lot of guilt I felt there of like, why don't I feel the same way I feel this go around?
Right. So, yeah. And every relationship is different, right? And every experience is different. And I had a similar experience where I too was bonded to my first child. And then I have this newborn, and it's like, you know, he's like in a corner and he's like, you know, the baby, whatever, seat. And it's not that stimulating with a newborn. No. And so that wasn't my favorite phase. And I also should say that like not every phase is going to be your favorite with parenting.
Newborn is not my favorite phase. I own that. I love being a toddler and like a kid mom.
Yes,
I find it so much more fun.
I agree. And having conversations with your it's like, oh my gosh. And just watching their brains develop.
Right.
In like
but
real
I know
time.
people love newborn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's great too. I think you're lucky if you love newborn also, because it's so challenging. I mean, it's all challenging, but not to beat yourself up or, you know, it's all good, you know, like you're doing so much. And I think that we need to, you know, normalize how complicated being a mom is and all the feelings that we have, you know, more that, you know, ambivalence is the hallmark of motherhood. You know, it's not like, you know, you love it 100% all the time. And so I think we need to talk about these complicated feelings, not that because there's nothing wrong with them. You know, we're complicated beings and relationships are complicated.
You don't love anything 100% of the time.
No.
But I feel we've lost that ability to admit that two conflicting emotions can coexist at once.
Right.
Especially around motherhood. It's you're supposed to love it all or you're a bad mom.
Right.
And I highly disagree with that. In the book Rattled, you talk about the story of a mother octopus. And I was super fascinated hearing this. A, just from like an animal perspective, I found it fascinating. But B, the correlation between this motherhood is martyrdom that we see in our country, at least. Can you tell us about this octopus journey that you went on learning about?
I mean, I was watching my octopus teacher, the documentary, and I just was fascinated by octopuses. And so I was, you know, doing more research on my own, like just trying to understand more about octopuses. And then I come across these articles that say, you know, the world's greatest mother, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I'm like reading about octopuses and what happens when they become moms. And it turns out that they have, you know, 200,000 eggs. And for 4 years, they just brood on top of them and they don't do anything else. Like they don't socialize, they don't leave to get food. And so they're basically depleted by the time they give birth. And it turns out they go on this death spiral and then literally kill themselves. And it's tragic, but I thought it was also a nice metaphor for what's happening, I think, in our society, in our culture, and how we view motherhood, that it's the greater the sacrifice, the better the mother, when in fact, you know, it's just the best thing for the babies, the best thing for the kids' development is maternal mental health. We know that. That's the single greatest predictor of childhood well-being. And so mothers taking care of themselves and their needs is important. In fact, more important, I think, than, you know, obviously you have to keep your baby alive, but this is part of it. Yeah, it's vital. Absolutely.
Why do you think, or what have you seen? Because I fully recognize this motherhood is martyrdom situation that's happening in our society. I see it in social media. I see it in comments. You know, if you're too happy or if you're doing something for yourself, you're a bad mom because you're ignoring your kids. Like, where does this stem from?
I
Do we
mean, I
know?
think it's well, just generations and generations
Yeah.
of moms, not talking about the real experience and really not being able to. I mean, I remember I talked to my mom about this. We've had conversations about this, and she was like, I wasn't allowed to have postpartum. Like, we
So
didn't
my mom
talk
says
about
too.
it.
I wasn't allowed
Right?
to say I didn't like it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think now we're allowed to say it more, but we also need to provide resources and support and nurture this process and understand, like, it's not just about, the challenges and what happens when we have postpartum and the negative, but it's also a brilliant, profound transformation and to get mothers to the other side. But right now we have a maternal mental health crisis in the US, and there's so many, landmines getting in the way of mothers really experiencing the full benefits of these changes. And so besides, lack of affordable childcare and parental leave and all that, there's just so many things that get in the way of mothers understanding and our society understanding how much we need to nurture this transformation.
You mentioned this transformation in the book, but also right now. And we have a full episode on this that I'll link in the show notes. But the word matrescence, for anyone who hasn't read your book or hasn't listened to that previous episode, can you tell them what matrescence is?
Yeah. So matrescence is a neurocognitive developmental phase. Researchers at Yale have now deemed it like a phase of development, just like adolescence. And during this phase, your brain changes rapidly, fine-tuning and priming itself for new learning. And then it also sheds things, neural networks that you don't need. That's called synaptic pruning. So it's basically like fine-tuning your brain, and it's becoming more efficient to take care of your baby, right? It's making you attuned to just better caring for your baby. I call it like Marie Kondoing your mind, right? To give moms a leg up in caregiving. But your identity changes, your relationship changes, you're experiencing new emotional changes like, mom rage, mom shame, mom guilt, the baby bonding, right? And so there's so much that goes into this, not to mention, the hormone changes and everything else, like the back to work changes. So it's just really an incredible period of, I call it transformation. So I want to empower mothers to understand what's happening, both the challenges and the cognitive boosts that come with it, the potential, and also help them set them up for success so that, postpartum can be treated very quickly if they get it, which even if there's certain risk factors that we know of, but even if you don't, there's still a risk of getting, if you don't have any of the risk factors, you still are at risk for getting postpartum. And we just need to catch more mothers, treat them, and get them on this path to brilliance.
And it's interesting because we hear a lot like, oh, I feel like you became a different person when you became a mom. But we do truly become different people. Does this happen after every birth, or is it the transition from 0 to 1 into motherhood?
It's interesting. I say that the biggest transformation is when you go from not mother to mother, but it's also a transformation every time you add a new baby to the mix, right?
Yeah.
And I actually think that, and I was just talking about this last week, the more children you have, it sort of ups the ante because your brain is sort of exponentially developing, based on the challenges that come with now having 2 babies and then being in 2 developmental phases at once. And then you add another baby to the mix, and it's suddenly you're juggling all of these other obstacles. And so your brain is just becoming more brilliant and learning new ways to cope and new ways of problem solving. And I think becoming, masterful, as long as it's not stressed. Overstressed, I would say, because obviously it's going to be stressful. But when we tack on the stressors, from our society and from lack of support and resources and, postpartum, then it becomes overstressed and we can't make use of all of these incredible brain changes and resiliency.
So in this, we mention the concept of like mommy brain, which people poo-poo on all the time, but it's so real. I know for me, like I forgot so much stuff, specifically when I was pregnant and freshly postpartum. I couldn't remember shit. I was missing word recall like drastically. I was forgetting things. I was placing my cell phone in the fridge and then being like, where the heck is my phone? What is mommy brain?
So this is so important. So the subjective experience of mommy brain is very real. So what you experienced is definitely, part of it, right? But the full picture of mommy brain is so much more than that, right? And so when you look at the research, so there's research that has taken mothers and not mothers and had them do memory tasks and cognitive tasks, and they actually there's very weak support for any differences in memory functioning comparing mothers to non-mothers. And some research actually shows cognitive boosts and benefits and better problem solving, efficiency, and flexibility. And so it's really the mom brain, the subjective experience, that real experience is mostly due to lack of sleep and increased mental load. I mean, think about it. Your brain is like trying to catch up to everything it's responsible for, and the things that aren't important to tending to your baby, like where your keys are, is going to fall to the wayside, right? And so, but you're not going to forget when to order diapers or, feeding time, right? Like that you can keep track of. And so your brain is just sort of adjusting to the incredible mental load that's happening, and it's overwhelming. And so you have to give yourself some grace and understand that this is part of the adaptation. But if we put you in a research study and had you objectively test your memory, it likely would perform just as well as a mom without it, even though it feels like
fascinating.
It's not. Well, I think that we have a stigma in our society that whenever a mom makes a mistake, it's like we have to like focus on it, and it's like, oh, mommy brain, right? And it's like, I want to rebrand mommy brain to be like the brilliant thing that you did, when you had a baby, like getting, a toddler and an infant out the door at the same time to make a doctor's appointment, right? That's mommy brain. Landing that new business proposal or client, or back to work, like just taking on a new challenge. That's mommy brain, right? Being able to sort of soothe your baby. Right. Figuring out, oh, okay, is it colic? Is it gas? Is it, is the formula, too concentrated? Whatever it is, figuring that out, that's mommy brain.
No, it's true. I mean, I think about even comparing like what happens before 9 a.m. on a day now in my brain of how much is happening comparatively to what was happening in my brain. And I'm not going to compare it as like a mom to someone who's child free. I'm saying from my lived experience of before motherhood and post motherhood, the amount that's happening in my brain in those windows of time, in that window of time, is so drastically different that it's a miracle anything gets done, quite honestly.
Well, you're doing so much. I mean, all of those things in your brain, that's doing. Right. And so we need to give credit to your brain for, doing that. And I had this idea of doing this experiment with moms that would write down every single thing that they, that crossed their mind and that they did from like 6 a.m. to like 8:30 a.m. right? And it's like hundreds. I started doing it one day and I was like, I can't even, it's too much.
I don't even think I could write them down. No, thoughts, like actions, fine, but thoughts, that'd be terrifying.
But you're mentally planning. You're timing things, you're organizing, you're like you're meeting all these needs. So psychologically it's an intense preoccupation. So it's doing so much. And I think we need to give credit to the maternal brain and classify it as really brilliant.
Right. No, I mean, it is fascinating. Even just the ability to converse, the multitasking of things. I think about this sometimes if I'm editing a video and I'm watching something back that I was filming. Like last night, I filmed myself cooking dinner. And it's like I'm cooking dinner, but I'm having a full-blown conversation simultaneously with my two kids while they're talking to me, meeting their needs of, oh, I hear one fell. Are you okay? What's going on? Please get off that chair. Like it's 5 different things happening at one time where it used to be more straightforward.
Right. And so, getting used to one being interrupted in everything that you do, right? But also, I mean, just to anchor it in like a little bit of research and to, think about, okay, you're probably, thinking about attuning to your kids' emotions, right? How are you going to soothe them? How are you going to make them feel better? That requires a lot of mental work. You're also keeping track of the temperature of the food and like when,
Hence why I burnt my steak last night.
But that's mommy brain,
I want to get into postpartum support from a professional. We talked in the beginning, you mentioned like how you went from like rock bottom to not performing, but thriving in a shorter period of time because you had the tools. Walk us through like what were those tools?
Well, first of all, I tell all my patients, all women, anyone that will listen to set up your postpartum mental health care team proactively. So once you pee on that stick, find yourself a therapist and prescriber. I know I say prescriber and people are going to be like, what? I need to get I'm not saying you have to take medication. I'm saying
Right, but having
establish care, right? Build that team just in case you need it, because it can be one, life-saving, and if you don't need it, great. That's wonderful, right? But we have a maternal mental health crisis in the U.S., so this needs to be part of, streamlined care, and it's not there yet. So the onus still falls on mothers to set this up. So you reach out to a therapist and prescriber. You meet with them while you're pregnant. They get a good baseline assessment of you. They can counsel you on your specific risk factors if you have any from your history. And they also know you. And you also get to figure out if you want to work with them and if you trust them and if you feel comfortable with them, because that can take a couple different tries, right? And then you establish follow-up appointments, after giving birth, right? And the professional can advise you on the timing of that, whether you have, plans to breastfeed or history of bipolar. We're going to check in with you 2 days later. If you don't have any of those things, maybe you'll go 2 weeks or a month out, right? But you're in touch with your team.
Yeah.
And in that way, you don't have to scramble last minute to find a provider. You don't have to wait 3 months for an appointment. And when you need your doctor, as I did, I literally texted my doctor from my closet and I said, I'm ready to take medication. I need it. And so she was able to prescribe me the medication, get it that day. I felt better in 9 days. I was thriving 2 months later, feeling better than ever. And I was like, this isn't that hard. It's stupid that we have a maternal mental health crisis in the US, because this is solvable.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, for me personally, I had my therapist during my first pregnancy, but I had just gone off of medication. I had been on anxiety meds and I had just gone off, and we were going to assess how I feel. And then I had a surprise pregnancy, so I wasn't medicated during my first pregnancy in the beginning.
Okay.
And I was anxious to a point where I wasn't sleeping. I was ruminating, had such intense ruminating thoughts. I felt like I was buzzing, and I was scrambling, where I just needed someone to be able to help me and prescribe me medication, because I knew, having had been on medication before, what a difference it would make for me in that moment. And I'm so grateful that I had that team for postpartum when we had to up my dosage and navigate that experience, and then through my second pregnancy and my second postpartum. And I hate that it's so hard, because it shouldn't be. This should be so standard. We take the baby to a doctor at 1 week. We should have these appointments. We should have these meetings set up, when clearly in this country, it's a problem.
A huge problem.
Are there other proactive things that we can do other than having this team?
I think you can have conversations about division of labor inside the house with your partner. You can, come up with a sleep schedule so that moms are getting, I literally highlight this in my book, protect mother's sleep at all costs.
All costs.
I think it's the only enlarged sentence in my book, because it's one, a mood stabilizer, and it's so protective, right? To help, not only for mood stuff, but also just stress management. And so mothers, if you can get a consistent block of time, 4 to 5 hours in the earlier part of the evening every night, to work with your partner or care team or support system to really help you with that and to establish that, so you have that consistent sleep. And so I think that can be a great discussion to have ahead of time with your partner.
Can we quickly, I just want to dive into that for a second.
Sure.
Because this is where, tying back to the motherhood is martyrdom situation, there's so much pushback and discourse that I see online, in other people's videos, in a video I've posted, of postpartum doulas and night nurses. And it's fascinating to me, because at the end of the day, we know, like you've said, the greatest factor in a child's well-being is the maternal mental health. And we also know that that is deeply correlated to sleep.
Yeah.
And it fascinates me that there's this anger, or, well, you're not, I'm trying to come at it from a neutral place and not lived experience of comments I've received, but I see it, that people are judging or saying that, taking the quote unquote easy way out of having overnight help. And I don't get, and I realize that it's not financially affordable for everyone, and I think it should be, right off the bat, I think that should be something that is covered by insurance and offered to everyone who wants it. But why it ties back into the motherhood is martyrdom. Like, why are we so anti people getting the help when we know that it's beneficial for the kid?
I know. Well, because mothers think they get a badge of honor for doing it all themselves, but really, and so, look, not every mother will need a doula or that night support. Some mothers are okay on like less sleep. I don't meet a lot of them, but
I'm
that's
not one.
Every family can make their own choice about what suits them. It's good to have the option available. It's good to think about this, about what, you want to do and plan for that. And if you can do it, without a doula or a night nurse, great. If you need that help, great. Also, like, it's whatever works for you. But like, let's not judge and criticize. It's like there's so many, we're all on the same team here,
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah. I can just say from my experience of someone whose sleep is deeply correlated to my mental health, I think that was a huge reason why I had such a hard time with my first postpartum, because we didn't have help. And my husband and I were also the new parents that we were like both up for every feed together, which looking back, like, why the fuck did we do that? Makes no sense. I'd be breastfeeding and he'd be like up sitting next to me, like trying not to fall asleep. And I'm just like looking back, why were we both doing that to ourselves?
Well, I think that, you don't know before you do it, right? But hopefully, Rattled is that roadmap to sort of think about a lot of these things ahead of time so that you understand, like, okay, to set yourself up for success, right? We got to divide and conquer here.
Right. And which we did with our second. And we had part-time help, which the greatest money I've ever spent in my life.
Right.
Without fail.
Yeah.
What would you say to the mom who feels like she's failing because she isn't enjoying every moment?
That is the hallmark of motherhood. Ambivalence is the norm, right? And so I say the most important word in motherhood is and, right?
Yeah.
And being able to hold two truths. I love my baby and I need a break, right? I hate this part of parenting and, I want to just be with my baby all the time, right? There's just like a lot of different feelings and emotions that, are opposing, right? But we need to make space for all of that because it's all part of it, right? And I think that we can accept that in ourselves and understand, that's okay. I'm complicated and, we're all complicated and we're not supposed to love every moment. That is literally not true for anyone of anything. So just to remember, ambivalence is the hallmark of motherhood.
I feel like once I accepted that two conflicting emotions can coexist at once, I enjoyed motherhood so much more.
Yeah.
Because I used to beat myself up or feel shame or guilt that I needed a second to myself. And that I didn't love being with the kids 24/7. And then I remembered I'm actually just a human with needs. And it's okay to want to have time to myself, to exercise, or to just take a beat.
Yeah.
And not have someone asking me questions 24/7.
Exactly.
How do we proactively protect our relationships going into postpartum, whether it be friendships or romantic relationships?
Oh, that's a great question. Friendships, that's a tough one, right? Because I feel like when you go through it, I know that when my friends had babies before me, I didn't really understand what was going on, right? So I love that question. I think having like transparent conversations and like, but at the same time, you don't need to apologize for this phase that you're in.
Right.
And your friendships may change for a little while and that's okay too. You are not an unlimited resource and you can't do everything all at once at the same time. And to be patient with yourself and, when you can, just be honest, transparent with your friends and, explain to them what's going on. I think that's, I'm always about like transparency and honesty and just, talking through it. But you may not have the bandwidth to do that in postpartum right away. And so it's okay. You can't be the best friend that you wanted to be or maybe have been all the time when you're having a baby.
And your close friends will understand that.
Yes.
Or should understand that. And relationships ebb and flow.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
What about romantic relationships like marriage?
Yes. So this is where I talk about, there's a lot you can do there. Yeah. So I would say definitely the division of labor aspect. I always recommend fair play.
The best. Eve came on the show and it was such a good episode.
Amazing. She's just I love talking with her, and we speak about the mental health components to that too, because if you're depressed or anxious, that's going to impact your perception of what feels fair, right? In the division of labor.
Oh my God.
So they go hand in hand, and Eve does a great job of now training therapists to do this and to implement, fair play into clinical practice. And so I always recommend that, and to be flexible, right? And to have these conversations often, because it's going to change, because you may plan something ahead of time before having a baby, and then you have the baby and you're like, wait, I don't actually want this task, or this is too hard. I don't
enjoy this.
Yeah. So like, let's change it up. Like, let's check in, have like a state of the union, and like, how's this working for us? I want to do this. Like, let's swap here. Right.
And adding another kid.
I mean, this is like conversations for the rest of your life,
right.
Yes. And to just, be open about that. And I think also to protect the relationship, having that postpartum team in place and being able to talk about that with your partner, but also dads get postpartum too, right? So 10% of dads get postpartum.
10%?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. 1 in 10.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have thought lower, quite honestly.
Yeah. And if you have, a spouse, a mother that has postpartum, it's, there's more of a likelihood. Postpartum is a huge stressor on the family unit and the relationship. So that's important to protect the marriage as well. Sleep, also protective.
Yeah. I mean, we have a full episode dedicated to the roommate phase, quote unquote, which I reference it as. And I think the more we can talk about that and prepare new moms, but also in your own relationship, because I remember I've been with my husband now for 18 years, and with our first during postpartum feeling like, what just happened to us? Who are you? Like, are we ever going to get back to where we were? Are we just now roommates who live in the same house and our ships passing in the night and only talking about how often our son poops? Like, is this what our marriage is now?
Yeah.
And it's not forever. It is right then, because that's the reality.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's importance of acknowledging that, discussing it, and realizing that this is only temporary. I mean, that's kind of all of postpartum advice, but especially with that. And that helped me so much the second go around, having that lived experience, because when we were in the roommate phase, it was like, okay, we're sleeping in separate beds right now because we're on shifts for our baby, but like, we'll be back in the same bed again. We'll have sex again one day. Like, we're going to be good.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're so freshly in it, especially the first time.
I think when you're in it, you just feel like it's never going to end.
Yeah.
That's like the experience of it, but know that it will. And, intimacy changes, and I get a lot of, concerns and questions about that in terms of, getting cleared for sex. But then like, your sex drive is just not where it used to be, right? Yeah. So, and how to navigate that. So I put in a lot of those tips in the book as well.
Can you share some? Because this is something we do talk about a lot, in like just keeping the spark alive within a marriage.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's important to know that when it comes to men and women in long-term relationships, men are more visual, and they also tend to be aroused before sex.
Yeah.
Right. And women, when we're in long-term relationships and after having kids and all that, we get aroused through the act of doing it. So we kind of have to say yes before we feel like saying yes. But I'm not saying you have to say yes anytime.
I was just going to say, let's be very clear.
Very clear. You don't want to have sex.
Like
you have a right to say no. Yeah.
But I feel like, I forget where I listened to an episode on this, and I was like, wow, this resonates with all of the conversations I'm having with my girlfriends, is typically the male is initiating it more.
Yes.
But then you're as into it once it's beginning.
Right.
And it takes a little bit of like, do I want to do this? You're not like initiating and having the thoughts of, I want to do this.
Right.
It's more, I want to do this, and then really enjoying it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I call it like a placeholder. So even if you end up not enjoying it as much as you would like, it's a placeholder for like future intimacy where you do get into it more, because sometimes we are so inundated with the daily tasks. Like I talk about how I can see my husband, it's like a switch. Like he can be a father putting the kids to bed and then immediately come into the bedroom and be in husband mode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I cannot switch that quickly. I need I told him, I put in the book 20 minutes, right? And that's but sometimes I need 5 and sometimes I need 3 days. So it varies. But to at least help him understand that I can't just switch back and forth that easily. I need time to re-enter my body and to, just decompress and
destimulate from all the touching.
Yes. So I have a lot of tips on like, you know, how to manage overstimulation and whatnot, but also to give myself that space of like, I need to just like take a moment and like, you know, reconnect, and then I'll consider it, right?
Yeah.
And I may still say no.
Right. Of course.
Or I may say yes. I mean, sometimes I just think like, you know, to be open to it is really important, and flexible, and understand that, you know, intimacy changes, ebbs and flows, and, you know, it's, you know, really hard to really manage all of this.
Right.
Yeah.
I also, for me, something that this is so random, but I was always someone who showered in the morning, and like I rarely ever showered at night. Ever since having kids, like right after we put them down, that shower for me is the time to just reconnect to myself. That marks like, okay, my moment, like focused on my kids right there in the day has passed. They're asleep. Now, I mean, typically it's working for a bit more than spending time with my husband, or if we're going out or something. That shower window is so helpful for me, even if I'm just quickly rinsing my body, to be like, okay, now I'm transitioning into me as XYZ. Because I have the same difficulty of like flipping that switch, even with work or with friends. Like it's so hard to go from mom mode to the other versions of you when you have so many different versions.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a great ritual. And just to anchor that in some science, I talk a lot about how water is really, you know, soothing and helpful. And I actually have a shower exercise where next time try this. So when you're in the shower, even if you're just rinsing off, like put your head under the water, but just keep like your nose out so you can breathe. But it creates this bubble around your head and your ears where you like, it just reduces all the stimulation. Like you can't hear anything outside. And I think that you know, is just a really helpful exercise. It's like being in a cocoon for me. And so, you know, it's just a little shift, right? So like I came up with that during COVID because I was like, I can't leave my house. And I just need to get away. Like, so I was thinking about different ways of escaping when we like can't really escape, which is like in the newborn phase also. So try it. Let me know what you think.
I will. In terms of overstimulation, you mentioned it, and I discuss it a lot because I'm someone who gets very overstimulated. It's confusing because my sisters are always like, how can you navigate this? For instance, like we have drums in our house that my kids are playing all the time. Something about that doesn't bother me. I don't know why, but if the fan above the stove is on, I can't have a conversation. Like fully cannot compute what you're saying to me if we're in conversation and that overhead fan is going. Or like battery operated toys. We don't have any in our house because that just fully sends me into like, I want to jump out of that window. What are some of your best tips and tricks for navigating overstimulation?
I think what you're doing, like you're figuring out what triggers you and what, you know, makes you feel overstimulated, because it is different for everyone. I imagine that, you know, when you have the fan on, you had either just cooked or you're cooking or you're thinking about meals or whatever. You're in the kitchen. So it's like something that like your brain is trying to pay attention to and figure out, and then trying to do anything else besides that like feels overwhelming. And then with the toys, it's like you're tending to your kids, you're, you know, attuning to them, and the extra noise just feels like, you know, one more thing that you can't handle. But I talk about the importance of taking that space where you can just reduce all stimulation. So turn the lights off, you know, no sound, get in your bed, put covers over your head, put on noise canceling headphones, like breathe, do some deep breathing exercises, like anything it takes to just get all stimulation out. You know, you can go for a walk, sometimes you need to like get out of the house. But if you can't, you know, there are ways to just like sit in a dark room, right? And just really like basically deprive your senses in any way that you can. You know, take a bath and stick your head. So I do the same thing in the bathtub, right? Like
I totally get that warm feeling.
And when you stick your head back and like you can breathe, but like it literally just, you know, something about that is just really comforting, and like you can't hear things and you can't hear the phantom baby cries, and I love it. So yes. And I do feel that so often we do that, we step away, but then we grab our phone. And I'm like, I've not noticed and acknowledged that when I do that, I'm just continuously stimulating myself in a different way. My brain actually just needs silence. Like I fully need to shut off. I can't be on my phone. It has to be just still. So it's good that you recognize that, because I think pay attention to it. And so some people might be able to like more dissociate and numb themselves with that. And, you know, that there's a time and place for that as well. And so I won't, you know, I wouldn't
say.
Reading. Well, yeah.
That
So
fully I can disassociate, and that's like a numbing, like it scratches my
yeah,
brain in a
and
great way.
sometimes you need a little numbing.
I need
right?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. It's a
I need an escape sometimes.
exactly. So to be flexible in all of these things, but to pay attention where like, okay, this is, I wouldn't like read something that's activating, or I wouldn't
Right.
like watch something that's going to like stimulate you more. Right. And so just being flexible about that and being able to, have the insight and awareness, I think is important.
Do you have any closing wisdom for women approaching postpartum?
To set up if I'm going to do the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people, I'm going to say set up your proactive postpartum mental health care team ahead of time. Just have that in place. We can solve this maternal mental health crisis. It is really unnecessary. This is a problem that can be solved. And if you do that proactively, I think we're going to catch more women. I think we're going to be able to treat them. And then, you're going to be able to make use of all of the profound and brilliant changes. It's sort of like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So I set my book up as a roadmap where like the first part of the book is proactive postpartum mental health care planning. And then you get to matrescence and then the emotional changes. And then you get to sort of, neuroplasticity and how to harness those changes to your advantage and take them even further, and the brilliance of mommy brain. But you can't benefit from the self-directed neuroplasticity exercises or tips or, whatever activities when you're suffering from postpartum. So we kind of have to make sure that's intact, and then you can, really thrive and get through this and like make it work for you.
Just because you mentioned it, can you give an example from the book or wherever that you want to pull from about the exercises for like neuroplasticity of expanding that?
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of exercises in general that promote neuroplasticity. So things like exercise, therapy changes the brain, all of that. But, when it comes to the self-directed neuroplasticity, I get more specific about, how to rise to specific challenges, right, with parenthood and up the ante and sort of understand like back to work challenges and how to make them work to your advantage. I talk about mom flow, right? So we're all familiar with flow, like the transcendent experience of being, lost in time and sort of fully immersed in your activity. And it's very healing for the brain. It helps you increase motivation, but also creativity, and does a million good things. And so I talk about how that changes in motherhood and how to get into mom flow, which is just basically training your brain to sort of get into it quicker, right? Because as moms, we're constantly interrupted.
Right.
We don't have hours of time to sort of dedicate to what we used to be able to do at work or even just like for fun. And so how to take advantage of that and, move quickly. And then I talk about the benefits of positive emotional experiences and how that helps, build resiliency in your brain and helps direct neuroplasticity. But, it's hard to have positive emotions when you're, not understanding how to get through mom rage or mom guilt, right? And so I give some very like counterintuitive strategies on how to shift that, right? And so you can take advantage of the positive emotional experiences and thus help your brain develop further. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you give us one? Like of... I'm just
Yeah,
trying to think,
sure.
like...
Okay, so like when it comes to mom guilt,
Yeah.
right? I get a lot of moms say, I feel guilty, leaving my baby at home and going out for a girls' dinner. That's just like a simple example, right? And so some moms will go out to dinner and they'll keep the monitor on their phone and they're preoccupied and they're checking in with their partner and they're like, how's the baby doing? What's happening? Blah, blah. But meanwhile, they're not like present at the dinner, right? And they're not engaged. They're not doing the things that would help facilitate positive emotional experiences.
Right.
So I would encourage moms, because your brain is going to tell you, you got to check on the baby. You got to keep the baby alive, right? Just, that's what your brain wants you to do, to sort of double down on that mom guilt, put the phone away, put the monitor away, try not to check in. What do you need as a mom to make that experience, as pleasurable as possible? Do you need to order your favorite drink? Do you need to come with, certain things that you want to talk about that are off topic about the baby? Talk about the latest like Housewives episode or whatever it is, right? And then do you need to be with a certain friend? Do you need to pick the restaurant? Do you need to, things that are just going to increase the positive pleasurable experiences so that it will refill your cup, right? And you'll get the benefits from social connection and from, having a stimulating conversation and from, just engaging in pleasurable experiences and your senses. And that actually helps your brain develop even further. So there's a lot of science behind that, which I break down in the book in an easy to read way. But it seems, I don't know, does it seem simple? It seems simple, but it's like,
but it's hard.
It's hard to do when you're becoming a mom. So it's like, not that you need to lean into pleasure more often. Like, I'm not saying, that you need to like go out every chance you get, right? I'm saying when you do go out, make it bigger. Lean into that. And what do you need to make it as enjoyable as possible so that you refill your cup and get the benefits of it so that you come home and feel replenished and your brain is, you're nurturing your brain during this incredibly stressful and transformative time.
Because otherwise you're kind of, not that you're wasting time, but I've been there where I go to a girls' dinner and the whole time I'm thinking about what's happening at home or I'm checking in and then I'm like, what's the point of even going?
Well,
if I'm not going to
probably a little point to going, like from an anxious perspective, like so just to
getting out of the house,
getting out of the house, getting away from the baby, that could do something for like your anxiety, right? But I would say, there's a lot more that can be done, but this is why you kind of have like you need to have the postpartum mental health intact, and then you get like the even better benefits when you can engage fully, right, and get away from your kid, like, mentally, and really immerse yourself in the social aspect of this and remind yourself, about all the different pleasures in life.
Yeah. And the versions of you outside of motherhood.
Yeah.
For people who want more of you, where can they find you and support you?
So definitely follow me at Dr. Nikki Pensak on Instagram. And then, read Rattled. Let me know what you think. I love hearing from readers. It's great. And if you do read it, please leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads or wherever you purchase the book, because reviews really help get the word out there as well. And I think that's important that people know that.
Well, thank you so much for coming on
Thanks
here. I really
for having me. Such a pleasure.